Durango, Colorado, summer, 1878. In the year 1878, when a man told his wife she was not his servant, but his equal partner, he changed her entire life. This is their story. The afternoon sun beat down on the wooden platform of the Durango train station, casting long shadows across the dusty boards. Caleb Hart stood with his hat pulled low, one hand gripping a letter that had been folded and unfolded so many times the creases threatened to tear clean through. 29 years old, weathered by mountain winters and scorching summers, he had built Hart Valley Ranch from nothing after his parents passed 5 years before. The land was good, the work was honest, but the nights were long, and the silence of that big house echoed with memories of a family that used to fill it with laughter. He shifted his weight boots, scraping against the platform. What would she think of him? A stranger who had promised nothing but hard work and a roof over her head. What would she think of this rough country so different from the brick and cobblestone streets of Boston? The train whistle screamed across the valley and Caleb's chest tightened. 300 miles to the east, Sarah Brooks pressed her forehead against the cool glass of the passenger car window. The San Juan Mountains rose before her like the walls of some ancient fortress peaks, still crowned with snow even in summer. She had never seen anything so vast, so wild, so utterly foreign to everything she had known. Her fingers worried at the worn fabric of her gray traveling dress. 23 years old, and she owned nothing but the clothes on her back and the small carpet bag at her feet. Everything else had been sold piece by piece to pay the debts her parents left behind when yellow fever took them 7 years ago. The memory flashed unbidden across her mind. Her uncle's house in Boston, the narrow servants' quarters where she slept. His voice thick with whiskey and rage. The sting of his hand across her face when she burned the evening meal. The bruises she learned to hide beneath long sleeves and high collars. You are only good for serving girl. That is all you will ever be. She had tried to run once, made it as far as the docks before he found her and dragged her back. The beating that followed kept her bedridden for a week. After that she learned to be quiet, to be invisible, to survive. Then she found the advertisement in the newspaper her uncle had left on the kitchen table. A rancher in Colorado seeking a wife, room and board provided. No prior experience necessary, just a willingness to work hard and build a life together. She had written the letter in secret, posted it on a day when her uncle was too drunk to notice her absence. When the reply came, she could barely believe the words. Simple, direct, kind. Miss Brooks, I would be honored if you would consider my proposal. I am not a wealthy man, but I am honest and hardworking. I promise you will be treated with respect and given a chance to start anew. If you are willing, I will send money for your passage. 3 weeks later, she boarded the train west with nothing but hope and terror warring in her chest. The conductor's voice cut through her thoughts. Next stop, Durango. Sarah stood smoothing her skirts with her fingers shaking. Whatever waited for her at that station, it could not be worse than what she was leaving behind. At least in Colorado, she would have her own name, her own choices. Even if those choices led to a life of endless labor, it would be labor on her own terms. The train lurched to a halt, steam hissing from the engine like the breath of some great beast. Sarah gripped her bag and stepped onto the platform. And there he was, tall, perhaps over 6 feet, with broad shoulders that spoke of years of hard physical work. His face was sun-darkened lines, etched at the corners of his eyes from squinting into bright skies. A scar cut through his left eyebrow, giving him a slightly roguish appearance. But his eyes, when they met hers, were a clear, steady blue-gray. Kind eyes. He removed his hat, revealing dark hair that curled slightly at his collar. Miss Brooks. His voice was deep, measured with the unhurried cadence of someone who had learned patience from the land itself. Sarah's throat felt tight. She managed a nod. I am Caleb Hart. He extended his hand not to grab or claim, but to offer. Welcome to Durango. She took his hand. His grip was firm but gentle, calloused palms warm against her fingers. He released her almost immediately, respecting the boundary of a stranger's touch. "I know you have had a long journey." He gestured toward the main street. "Are you hungry?" The question caught her off guard. She had expected to be taken directly to his ranch, put to work immediately to prove her worth. Instead, he was asking about her comfort. Yes, sir. Caleb. His mouth quirked in what might have been the beginning of a smile. "Please just call me Caleb, and we will get you some food right away." He picked up her bag, light as it was, and led her down the platform. An older Mexican man waited near a wagon, his weathered face breaking into a warm smile when he saw them. "Señor Caleb." He nodded respectfully, then turned to Sarah with even greater warmth. "Señora." Sarah blinked. No one had ever called her that before. "This is Jose Martinez," Caleb said. "My foreman and the man who keeps Heart Valley running when my head gets too full of plans. Jose, this is Miss Sarah Brooks. Soon to be Señora Hart." Jose said, his eyes twinkling. "Welcome, welcome. You are a blessing to this man, I think." Caleb's ears turned slightly red, but he said nothing, only helped Sarah toward the restaurant across the street. The inside was simple but clean, with checkered tablecloths and the smell of fresh bread. Caleb pulled out a chair for her, waited until she was seated before taking his own seat. When the server came, he ordered coffee and asked Sarah what she would like. "Whatever you are having is fine." "Sarah." He leaned forward slightly, his eyes serious. "I am asking what you would prefer, not what you think I want you to say." She swallowed hard. "Soup, then, and bread if they have it. They have excellent stew." Caleb ordered for both of them, then poured coffee from the pot the server left. He slid a cup toward her. "Sugar and cream are there if you want them." They sat in silence for a moment, Sarah's hands wrapped around the warm cup, grateful for something to hold on to. Caleb seemed content to wait, not pushing her to fill the quiet with nervous chatter. "How was Boston?" he finally asked. "The weather, I mean. Different from this, I imagine." Sarah glanced up, surprised. "You want to talk to me?" "Of course." He looked genuinely puzzled. "You are the person I am going to be living with. I should know what you like, what you think about. I like books." The words tumbled out before she could stop them, but I was not allowed to read much. My uncle said it was a waste of time for someone like me. Something flickered in Caleb's eyes. Anger, perhaps, but carefully controlled. "Well?" His voice was quiet but firm. "At Heart Valley, no one will stop you from reading. I have a whole shelf of books. My mother loved to read. You can have as many as you want." Sarah felt tears prick at her eyes. She blinked them back. "Thank you." The stew arrived thick with beef and vegetables, accompanied by crusty bread, still warm from the oven. Sarah waited as she had been trained for Caleb to eat first. He noticed. "Please go ahead. I am not hungry until you are." She took a tentative bite. It was delicious, and she realized with a start that she could not remember the last time she had eaten a full meal. At her uncle's house, she took her food in the kitchen after everyone else had finished eating whatever scraps remained. Caleb ate in silence occasionally, glancing at her as if to make sure she was comfortable. When he spoke again, his tone was gentle. "Sarah, I want to tell you something, and I need you to believe me. You wrote in your letter that you would work hard and not cause trouble. I appreciate that honesty, but I did not ask you to come here to be my servant." She set down her spoon, heart hammering. "Then why?" "Because I need a partner, someone to share this life with." His hands rested on the table, open and unthreatening. "Yes, there is work to do. That is the reality of ranch life. But we do it together, as equals." "You understand," Sarah stared at him. In her entire life, no man had ever spoken to her of equality. Her father had been kind, but distant. Her uncle had been a tyrant. The few men she encountered on the streets of Boston looked through her as if she were invisible. "I do not understand why you would say that, because it is the truth." Caleb held her gaze. My father taught me that every person has dignity regardless of where they come from or what they have done. You are coming to Heart Valley as my wife. That means something. It means respect. It means partnership. The words settled into her chest, warm and strange and impossibly fragile. They finished the meal in a more comfortable silence. When Caleb paid the bill and helped her into the wagon, his touch on her elbow was brief and courteous. Jose took the reins and they rolled out of Durango into the open country beyond. The landscape unfurled before them like a painting, vast meadows of golden grass, dark forests of pine climbing the mountainsides, and everywhere the peaks of the San Juans watching over the land like ancient sentinels. The Animas River ran alongside the road, its water clear and cold from the snowmelt above. The ranch is about an hour from here, Caleb said. It is not fancy, but it is solid. My father built the house before he died. He wanted something that would last. I am sure it is lovely. It is home. He glanced at her. Our home now, if you are willing. Sarah nodded, not trusting her voice. They rode in silence for a time, the rhythm of the wagon wheels and the sound of the river filling the space between them. Then Caleb pointed to a break in the trees. There. Heart Valley. The ranch lay spread across a broad valley sheltered on three sides by rising hills. The house was 2 stories built from honey-colored logs, with a wide porch that wrapped around the front. Smoke curled from the chimney. Nearby stood a sturdy barn, a stable, and several smaller outbuildings. Cattle dotted the hillsides and horses grazed in a corral near the house. "It is beautiful," Sarah whispered. Caleb smiled, and it transformed his face, softening the hard angles and making him look younger. "It is home, our home now." When they pulled up to the house, a woman emerged from the door, wiping her hands on her apron. Maria Martinez, Jose's wife, had the round, comfortable figure of someone who loved to feed people and the warm smile of someone who genuinely cared about their well-being. Senora Hart. She hurried down the steps. "Welcome, welcome. I have been waiting to meet you." Sarah climbed down from the wagon with Caleb's help, overwhelmed by the reception. At her uncle's house, she had been an unwanted burden. Here she was being welcomed like family. Maria ushered her inside, chattering in a mix of English and Spanish about the meal she had prepared, the room that was ready, the beauty of the valley in summer. The interior of the house was simple but well cared for. A large stone fireplace dominated one wall of the main room. Shelves lined another wall filled with books, just as Caleb had promised. A sturdy table with chairs sat near the kitchen door, and a rocking chair faced the fireplace. Sarah ran her fingers along the edge of the kitchen table, noting the craftsmanship. "This is well made. Caleb's mother designed this kitchen," Maria said. She knew how to organize space, so everything was within reach. "You have a good eye, Senora." Sarah glanced at Caleb, who had followed them inside. He was watching her with an expression she could not quite read. "My mother would have liked you," he said quietly. Jose brought her bag upstairs, and Maria showed her the washroom, the linen closet, and finally a bedroom on the second floor. It was small but bright, with a window overlooking the valley and a bed covered in a colorful quilt. Sarah froze in the doorway. "A separate room." Maria smiled knowingly. "Senor Caleb, he is a good man. He wants you to be comfortable." Caleb appeared behind them, his expression serious. "Sarah, there is something I need to say clearly right from the start." He stepped into the room, keeping a respectful distance. Maria quietly withdrew, closing the door most of the way, but leaving it slightly ajar. Caleb took a breath. "You are my wife, Sarah, not my servant, not my employee, not someone I hired to cook and clean and do my bidding. I need a partner, a person to share this life with. Yes, there is work to be done. That is the reality of living out here. But we do it together, as equals. Do you understand?" The words hit her like a physical blow. No one had ever called her equal. No one had ever given her a choice. "I do not," her voice broke. "No one has ever spoken to me like that." "Then it is about time someone did." Caleb's eyes were steady, sincere. I want you to be happy here. We are married in the eyes of the law as of tomorrow morning when Reverend Todd performs the ceremony. But I am not going to rush you. I am not going to demand anything. This room is yours for as long as you need it. When you are ready, if you are ready for us to be husband and wife, in every sense that will be your choice, not my command. Do you understand? Sarah sank onto the edge of the bed, tears streaming down her face. She had held herself together through the entire journey, through the fear and uncertainty and bone-deep exhaustion. But this kindness, this unexpected, overwhelming kindness, broke through every defense she had built. Caleb knelt in front of her, not touching, just present. Sarah, you do not owe me anything. You are not in debt to me. You are my partner, and I will treat you as such. She looked at him through her tears. Why? Why would you do this? Because it is right. Because you deserve respect and dignity. Because I do not want a servant. I want someone to build a life with. A knock at the door interrupted them, Jose's voice apologetic. Patron, there is a problem. Caleb stood, his jaw tightening. What kind of problem? Men from town. They say there is talk. About tomorrow. Sarah wiped her eyes. I am causing trouble already. No, Caleb's voice was firm. You are not causing anything. This is something else. He looked at Jose. Who is talking Blackwood's men? They are saying you are desperate, taking a mail-order bride. Blackwood himself told the banker that you are unstable. Sarah stood. Who is Blackwood? Caleb's expression darkened. Hiram Blackwood owns the largest ranch in the county. He has been trying to buy Hart Valley for years. I have refused every offer. Jose shifted uncomfortably. There is more, Patron. The banker sent a message. Your loan payment has been moved up. Instead of 4 months, you now have 2. Sarah saw the blood drain from Caleb's face. That is not what the contract says. Blackwood has influence at the bank. The banker is his friend. Caleb turned to Sarah, his eyes full of regret. I am sorry. I should have told you before you came. The ranch is in debt. $4,000. I have been working to pay it off, but this last winter was hard. We lost cattle in the storms. If I cannot pay, the bank will foreclose, and Blackwood will buy the property for next to nothing. Sarah's mind raced. And he is using our marriage as proof that you are, what, irresponsible, something like that. Caleb ran a hand through his hair. I understand if you want to leave. I will give you money for passage back to Boston. You should not be dragged into this. Sarah stood her back straight. I am not leaving. Caleb looked at her in surprise. Sarah, you do not understand what you are up against. Blackwood is ruthless. He will do whatever it takes to get this land. Then we will do whatever it takes to keep it. She met his eyes. You told me I am your partner. That means we face this together. For the first time since Jose had knocked, Caleb smiled. It was a small smile touched with both hope and worry, but it was real. All right then. He looked at Jose. We marry tomorrow as planned, and then we deal with Blackwood. After Jose left, Caleb turned back to Sarah. You should rest. Tomorrow will be a long day. But Sarah had one more question. Caleb, what you said before, about me being your wife, not your servant, did you mean it, every word? She nodded slowly. Then I will do everything I can to help you keep this ranch. Not because I owe you, but because I choose to. Caleb's eyes shone with something that might have been gratitude or relief, or the beginning of something deeper. Thank you, Sarah. That night, Sarah lay in the bed under the colorful quilt listening to the unfamiliar sounds of the ranch. Cattle lowing in the distance, the wind moving through the pines, the creak of the house settling. And somewhere down the hall, the quiet movements of a man who had shown her more kindness in one afternoon than she had known in 7 years. She thought about his words, "You are my wife, not my servant." For the first time since her parents died, Sarah felt something fragile and precious unfurl in her chest. Hope. The wedding and first battle. Dawn broke over Hart Valley with the kind of clarity that only high mountain country could offer. Sarah woke to golden light streaming through her window and the smell of coffee drifting up from the kitchen below. For a moment, suspended between sleep and waking, she forgot where she was. Then memory returned. Colorado, the ranch, Caleb Hart. Today she would become his wife in the eyes of God and the law. She dressed carefully in the simple white dress Maria had brought the night before. It was not fancy, just clean cotton with a modest collar and pearl buttons down the front, but it was far nicer than anything Sarah had owned in years. Maria had also left wildflowers in a blue glass jar on the dresser. Purple columbine and yellow arnica gathered from the meadows around the ranch. When Sarah came downstairs, Caleb was standing by the fireplace in a dark suit, his hair neatly combed, his face freshly shaven. He turned when he heard her footsteps, and something passed across his features. Surprise, perhaps, or admiration. "You look beautiful." Sarah felt heat rise to her cheeks. "Thank you. You look very handsome." Jose and Maria waited by the door, both dressed in their Sunday best. Jose offered Sarah his arm with a courtly bow. "Señora, it would be my honor to escort you to the church." The little white church sat at the edge of Durango, its steeple reaching toward the cloudless sky. Reverend Samuel Todd waited on the steps, a round-faced man in his early 40s, with kind eyes and a welcoming smile. He shook Caleb's hand warmly, then took Sarah's with equal gentleness. "Miss Brooks, welcome to our community. I understand this has all happened rather quickly, but Caleb is a good man. You have my word on that. Thank you, Reverend." Inside the church was simple and cool, with wooden pews and windows that let in streams of morning light. There were no other guests, just Jose and Maria to stand as witnesses, and the four of them gathered at the altar. Reverend Todd opened his Bible. "Dearly beloved, we are gathered here in the sight of God to join this man and this woman in holy matrimony." The ceremony was brief and solemn. Sarah spoke her vows in a voice that barely rose above a whisper, acutely aware that she was promising to love, honor, and obey a man she had known for less than 24 hours. But when Caleb took her hand to slide the simple gold band onto her finger, his touch was steady and sure. His eyes, when they met hers, held nothing but quiet certainty. "I, Caleb Joseph Hart, take you, Sarah Elizabeth Brooks, to be my lawfully wedded wife, to have and to hold from this day forward, for better or for worse, for richer or for poorer, in sickness and in health, until death do us part." Sarah felt tears prick at her eyes. She managed to repeat her own vows without her voice breaking. "You may kiss your bride." Caleb leaned down. For a moment Sarah tensed, old fear rising unbidden, but he did not claim her mouth. Instead, he pressed a gentle kiss to her cheek, his lips warm and brief and entirely respectful. It was tender, almost brotherly, and Sarah felt an unexpected pang of something she could not quite name. After they signed the register, Reverend Todd clasped both their hands. "May God bless your union and grant you many years of happiness together." Outside, Maria embraced Sarah with tears in her eyes. "You are family now, mija. Always remember that." But there was no time for celebration. Caleb needed supplies from the general store, and they had to make the trip into town before heading back to the ranch. Sarah climbed into the wagon beside her new husband, hyper-aware of the gold band on her finger and the strange new weight of the name she now carried. Mrs. Caleb Hart. Durango's main street was busy with Saturday morning commerce. Cowboys on horseback wagons loaded with goods, women in their best dresses doing their shopping. Sarah felt eyes turn toward them as Caleb helped her down from the wagon. Whispers followed in their wake. "That is Hart's new wife. Mail-order bride, I heard, from back east. Poor thing probably does not know what she is getting into." The general store was a large building near the center of town, its windows displaying everything from dry goods to mining equipment. Behind the counter stood a severe-looking woman in her late 50s, her gray hair pulled back in a tight bun. This was Mrs. Abigail Thornton, and the coldness in her eyes when she looked at Sarah could have frozen the Animas River solid. Mr. Hart. Her voice was clipped, formal. I did not realize the store allowed newcomers. Caleb's jaw tightened. Mrs. Thornton, this is my wife, Sarah Hart. You will address her with respect. Your wife, Mrs. Thornton's eyebrows rose. I heard you had married a mail-order bride, but I confess I thought it was merely gossip. Have you lost your senses entirely? A woman you do not even know I know enough. Caleb's voice was quiet but edged with steel. And my marriage is not your concern. On the contrary, it is very much the concern of this community when one of our ranchers makes such a reckless decision. Mrs. Thornton looked Sarah up and down with barely concealed disdain. I suppose you come from good family, Mrs. Hart. Sarah felt her face burn with shame, but before she could respond, a new voice cut through the tension. Well, well, if it is not the happy couple. The man who entered the store commanded attention simply by existing. Hiram Blackwood stood over 6 feet tall with silver-streaked hair and the kind of expensive suit that marked him as a man of wealth and influence. Everything about him spoke of power, from his polished boots to the gold watch chain across his vest. But his eyes, when they settled on Sarah, were cold and calculating. Behind him came a younger man, lean and dangerous-looking, with a scar running down the left side of his face. This was Dutch Keller Blackwood's foreman, and the way he looked at Sarah made her skin crawl. Heard you got yourself hitched, Hart. Blackwood's smile did not reach his eyes. To a mail-order bride, no less. My. I knew you were struggling, but I did not realize things had gotten quite that desperate. Caleb stepped forward, placing himself between Blackwood and Sarah. What I do on my land is none of your concern. See, that is where you are wrong. Blackwood strolled closer, hands in his pockets, the picture of casual menace. When you bring an unknown woman into our community, it becomes everyone's concern. For all we know, she could be a confidence artist, a thief. Who knows what kind of people answer those advertisements? Sarah found her voice. I am none of those things. Blackwood ignored her completely, keeping his gaze fixed on Caleb. I hear the bank moved up your payment deadline. 2 months now instead of 4. That must be quite a burden, especially with a new wife to support. You know damn well why they moved it up. Caleb's hands clenched into fists. You have the banker in your pocket. Now, no need for accusations. Blackwood's smile widened. I am simply a concerned neighbor. In fact, I have a proposal for you. Sell me Hart Valley. I will give you a fair price. Enough to pay off your debts and start somewhere new. You and your bride can leave with some dignity intact. I will never sell to you. Then you will lose it anyway. Blackwood's voice dropped, losing all pretense of friendliness. 2 months, Hart. When you default, the bank will foreclose, and I will buy your precious ranch for pennies on the dollar. One way or another, Hart Valley will be mine. Dutch Keller stepped forward, his eyes on Sarah. Shame if something happened before then. Accidents do occur on ranches. Buildings catch fire. Cattle wander off. Pretty wives get hurt. That is enough. Sheriff John Davies had entered the store unnoticed. His voice carried the weight of authority, though his face showed the weariness of a man caught between law and politics. Blackwood, take your man and leave. Now. Blackwood tipped his hat mockingly. Of course, Sheriff. We were just leaving. He paused at the door, looking back at Caleb. 2 months, Hart. Think about my offer. After they left, the store seemed to exhale. Mrs. Thornton busied herself with inventory, suddenly unwilling to meet anyone's eyes. Sarah realized her hands were shaking. Caleb guided her outside with a gentle hand on her elbow. I am sorry you had to see that. On the wagon ride back to the ranch, Sarah was silent, her mind working. Finally she spoke. The debt. How much exactly? $4,000. Caleb kept his eyes on the road. This last winter was brutal. I lost nearly 30 head of cattle in the blizzards, and the hay crop failed because of the drought the summer before. I have been working to make it up, but what if you sold more than just beef? Sarah turned to face him. Wool and hides, leather goods. My mother used to run a small business in Boston before she died. She taught me about diversification, about finding multiple revenue streams." Caleb looked at her with something like wonder. That is actually a smart idea. Jose knows leatherwork, and we have been shearing the sheep but just stockpiling the wool. Then we use it." Sarah felt a strange confidence rising in her chest. "We find buyers. We make this ranch profitable enough that the bank has no reason to foreclose." Caleb pulled the wagon to a stop. They had reached a bend in the road where the Animas River curved close, its water rushing over smooth stones. The San Juan Mountains rose in the distance, their peaks sharp against the blue sky. "Come here." He climbed down and offered her his hand. "I want to show you something." They walked to the riverbank where the grass grew thick and green. Caleb gestured to the view. "This is my favorite spot on the whole ranch. When things get hard, I come here to remember why I am fighting so hard to keep this land." Sarah looked out at the mountains, at the endless sky, at the water sparkling in the sun. "It is beautiful. It is home." He turned to her. "Our home. If you truly want to help me save it, Sarah, I would be grateful. But I do not want you to feel obligated. I do not feel obligated." She met his eyes. "I feel partnered. You said we would face things together. I am choosing to do that." Something passed between them in that moment. Not love, not yet, but the first fragile threads of trust and mutual respect. When they returned to the ranch in the late afternoon, Jose was waiting with grim news. "Patron, we have a problem." The fence along the eastern pasture had been cut during the night. Not broken by animals or weather, but deliberately cut with wire cutters. 15 head of cattle were missing. Caleb examined the fence line, his face dark with anger. Jose knelt beside the cut wires and pointed to boot prints in the soft earth. Not coyotes. Men did this. Sarah studied the tracks. Even to her untrained eye, they looked deliberate, calculated. Sheriff Davies arrived an hour later, summoned by Jose. He examined the evidence with a professional eye, but his expression was troubled. "I know who did this, Caleb. We all know. But without witnesses or hard proof, there is nothing I can do." "Blackwood." Caleb's voice was flat. "Almost certainly his men." The sheriff removed his hat, running a hand through his graying hair. "But Dutch Keller will have an alibi. Blackwood will swear his men were nowhere near here. Unless you caught them in the act, my hands are tied. He has the banker in his pocket. Now he is stealing my cattle. What am I supposed to do? John, be careful." The sheriff's voice dropped. "Blackwood owns 40% of the bank's stock. He has influence with the mayor, with the territorial governor. If he wants your land badly enough, he will find a way to take it. The only way to fight him is with evidence. Solid, undeniable proof of his crimes." After the sheriff left, Sarah found Caleb standing alone in the barn, his shoulders tight with frustration. She approached quietly. "There has to be a way to get that proof." Caleb turned. "How, I do not know yet, but I will think of something." She stepped closer. "You are not alone in this, Caleb. Remember." He looked at her for a long moment, and then unexpectedly he smiled, slightly, wearily, but genuinely. "You are something else, Sarah Hart." That night Sarah lay in her bed, unable to sleep. Every creak of the house made her jump. Every sound outside her window seemed threatening. Finally, near midnight, she heard footsteps in the hall, a soft knock at her door. Sarah Caleb's voice was concerned. "Are you all right? I saw your light." She opened the door. He stood in the hallway fully dressed, as if he too had been unable to rest. "I keep thinking about what that man Dutch said, about accidents, about pretty wives getting hurt. I will not let anyone hurt you." Caleb's voice was fierce. "I promise you that. I am not worried about me. I am worried about being a burden to you, about making things harder instead of easier." Caleb stepped closer, but respectfully, always maintaining proper distance. "Sarah, listen to me. You are not a burden. You are my partner. We face this together, okay?" Sarah felt something loosen in her chest. "Okay." He reached out slowly, giving her time to pull away if she wanted. When she did not move, he took her hand. His palm was warm, calloused from years of hard work, but his touch was gentle. Just this. Just the simple comfort of human connection. Try to sleep. Tomorrow we start fighting back. The next week passed in a blur of activity. Sarah threw herself into learning everything she could about ranch life. Maria taught her to cook for a dozen hungry men, to make bread that would rise properly at high altitude, to preserve vegetables for the long winter ahead. Jose showed her how to ride patiently, guiding her through the basics until she could manage a gentle mare on her own. Cole and Daniel Morrison, the younger ranch hands, treated her with a mixture of shyness and respect, calling her ma'am and tipping their hats whenever she passed. But it was Caleb who taught her about the land itself, how to read the weather in the movement of clouds over the peaks, how to spot a sick cow by the way it held itself apart from the herd, how to manage the water rights and grazing rotations that kept the ranch sustainable. One afternoon, while checking the horses, they found one of the mares with a deep cut on her foreleg. The animal was in pain, stamping and snorting, and none of the men could get close enough to examine the wound. "We will have to get the veterinarian from town," Caleb said, "but that will take hours, and she could develop infection." Sarah stepped forward. "Wait, let me try something." She approached the mare, slowly speaking in a low, soothing voice. When the horse calmed enough, Sarah examined the wound. It was deep but clean. She turned to Maria. "Do you have yarrow growing in your garden? And comfrey sea by the back fence? Bring me both. And clean cloth for bandaging." Within minutes, Sarah had created a poultice using the herbs her mother had taught her about years ago. She applied it to the mare's leg with steady hands, then wrapped the wound carefully. The horse stood quietly, as if understanding she was being helped. Cole watched in amazement. "Mrs. Hart, where did you learn that? From my mother?" Sarah wiped her hands on a cloth. She believed in the healing power of plants. Said doctors were too expensive for people like us, so we had to know how to care for ourselves. That evening, when they checked on the mare, the swelling had already begun to reduce. By the next morning, the horse was putting weight on the leg again. "You saved her," Caleb said quietly. "The vet would have charged $20, and she might have lost the leg anyway. You saved her with plants from the garden." Sarah felt a warm glow of pride. It is what partners do. Help each other. But their fragile peace was not to last. 3 nights later, Sarah woke to shouting and the smell of smoke. She ran to her window and saw flames leaping from the hay barn, orange and terrible against the black sky. Without thinking, she pulled on her robe and ran downstairs. Outside was chaos. Caleb and the ranch hands were forming a bucket brigade from the well, but the fire was spreading faster than they could contain it. The heat was intense, pushing them back. Sarah's mind raced. The river. "We need to get water from the river." "It is too far," Jose shouted over the roar of the flames. "Then we make a line." Sarah ran toward the animus, grabbing buckets as she went. "Maria, get everyone who can carry water. Make a line from the river to the barn. Closer to the water, faster the buckets move." For a moment, everyone stared at her. Then Maria started shouting orders in rapid Spanish, and suddenly they were all moving. 20 people formed a human chain from the river to the burning barn, passing buckets hand to hand in a rhythm that was far more efficient than running back and forth to the well. Sarah worked until her arms screamed with exhaustion, until her face was black with soot and her hands raw from the bucket handles. But slowly, gradually, the flames began to retreat. By dawn, the fire was out. The hay barn was badly damaged, but not destroyed. And more importantly, the fire had not spread to the other buildings or the house. Caleb walked through the smoldering wreckage, examining the damage. Then he knelt and picked something up, a piece of cloth half burned. The remains of a torch. This was not an accident. Dutch Keller had been spotted riding away from the ranch in the early hours of the morning. One of the neighboring homesteaders had seen him and reported it to Sheriff Davies. But by the time the sheriff arrived to investigate, Dutch had disappeared. Blackwood, of course, swore his foreman had been in town all night and produced 3 witnesses to confirm it. Sarah stood with Caleb in the ruins of the barn, both of them exhausted and covered in soot. Around them, Jose and the hands were already planning repairs, their voices tired but determined. Caleb turned to her suddenly. "You saved this place tonight. The barn, maybe the whole ranch. That idea about the river line, it was brilliant." "We saved it," Sarah corrected. "Together." He looked at her, really looked at her, and something shifted in his expression. This woman who had arrived terrified and uncertain just days ago now stood before him with soot on her face and determination in her eyes. This woman who had organized a bucket brigade and fought fire alongside hardened ranch hands. This woman who was his wife. "Sarah." His voice was rough with emotion and smoke. "Yes, thank you. For staying. For fighting. For being here. I am your partner." "That is what you said. That is what I choose to be." Caleb stepped closer. With one hand he gently wiped a smudge of ash from her cheek. "May I kiss you properly this time?" Sarah's breath caught. Yes. He cupped her face in his hands, giving her every chance to change her mind to pull away. But she did not. She leaned into him, and when his lips met hers, it was nothing like the chaste kiss at their wedding. This was real, hungry, full of all the fear and relief and desperate hope they had both been holding back. When they finally broke apart, both breathless Caleb rested his forehead against hers. "I am falling for you, Sarah Hart. I know it has only been days, but I cannot help it." Sarah felt tears mix with the soot on her face. "I am falling for you, too." Around them the sun was rising over the San Juan Mountains, painting the sky in shades of gold and pink. The barn was damaged. The threat from Blackwood loomed larger than ever. But standing there in the ashes, holding each other, they had something Hiram Blackwood could never buy or steal. They had partnership. They had trust. And they had the beginnings of love. Building trust and facing threats. The morning after the fire dawned clear and cool, the kind of perfect mountain day that made all hardship seem temporary. Sarah woke with the memory of Caleb's kiss still warm on her lips. She lay in bed for a moment watching dust motes dance in the sunlight streaming through her window and allowed herself to smile. For the first time in longer than she could remember, she felt something other than fear or exhaustion. She felt hope. She felt wanted. She felt the stirrings of something deeper, something she had thought lost to her forever. When she came downstairs, Caleb was already in the kitchen. He had coffee brewing on the stove and was attempting to slice bread with more enthusiasm than skill. He looked up when he heard her footsteps, and the expression that crossed his face made her heart skip. "Good morning." His voice was slightly rough, as if he too had not slept much. "About last night, if I was too forward, I apologize. The kiss, I mean. I should have asked first." Sarah crossed to him, surprised by her own boldness. "You did ask." And I said yes. "I know, but in the moment with everything that happened—" He set down the knife, his eyes searching hers. "I do not want you to feel pressured, or like you owe me anything, because I am your husband." She reached out and took his hand, feeling the calluses and strength in his fingers. "Caleb, for the first time in my life, I wanted someone to touch me, not because I was obligated or afraid of what would happen if I refused, but because I truly wanted it." The relief in his eyes was palpable. He lifted her hand to his lips and kissed her knuckles gently. "Then I am glad, because I wanted it too, very much." They stood there in the kitchen with the morning light warming the room around them, and something shifted between them. Not the desperate passion of the night before, but something quieter and more profound. The recognition that they were choosing each other, not out of necessity or convenience, but because they genuinely wanted to be together. Over breakfast, Sarah found herself telling him things she had never told another living soul. About her childhood in Boston, when her father ran a small bookshop and her mother tended a garden in their tiny yard. about how yellow fever swept through their neighborhood when she was 16, taking both her parents within days of each other, about the uncle who had taken her in ostensibly out of family duty, but who quickly made it clear that she was nothing more than unpaid labor. He would get drunk most nights. Sarah's voice was steady, but her hands trembled slightly around her coffee cup, and when he was drunk, he would find reasons to punish me. A dish not washed properly, supper served too late. Sometimes no reason at all, just his anger needing an outlet. Caleb's jaw tightened. Did he never... Sarah understood what he was asking. He never touched me that way. But the beatings were bad enough. Once, when I was 17, I tried to run away. I made it to the docks, thought I could find work on one of the ships. But he found me, dragged me back. What he did to me after that, I could not walk for a week. If I ever meet that man, Caleb said quietly, I will make him answer for what he did to you. No. Sarah reached across the table and took his hand. Do not let him take one more moment of our lives. He is in the past. You gave me something far more valuable than revenge. What is that freedom? The word hung in the air between them, simple and profound. You gave me freedom, Caleb, the freedom to choose, the freedom to be myself, the freedom to have a future that is mine to shape. Later that morning, while Caleb and the hands were repairing the damaged barn, Jose found him alone for a moment. The older man had been with the Hart family for nearly 20 years, and he had watched Caleb grow from a boy into a man. He knew him perhaps better than anyone. Patron, may I speak plainly, always Jose. The older man leaned against a fence post, his weathered face thoughtful. She loves you. I can see it in the way she looks at you when you are not watching. Caleb set down the hammer he had been holding. I love her too. God help me, Jose. I have only known her a handful of days, but I love her. Is that madness? Is it madness to recognize your other half when you find them? Jose shook his head. Some people search their whole lives and never find what you have found in days. But I see doubt in your eyes, hijo. What troubles you? How do I know this is real? How do I know she is not just grateful or afraid to leave because she has nowhere else to go? Jose was quiet for a moment, choosing his words carefully. Love is not debt, Caleb. Love is choice. Every morning your Sarah wakes up and chooses to stay, chooses to work beside you, chooses to fight for this ranch as if it were her own. Those are not the actions of someone who feels trapped. Those are the actions of someone who has found home. The truth of those words settled into Caleb's chest like a warm weight. You are right. Thank you, my friend. That evening, as the sun began its descent behind the western peaks, Caleb found Sarah in the garden, where Maria had been teaching her about the vegetables that grew well at high altitude. She was kneeling in the dirt, her hands busy with weeding her face, peaceful in concentration. Would you like to go for a ride? The sunset from Eagle Ridge is something you should see. Sarah looked up, pushing a strand of hair from her face and leaving a smudge of dirt on her cheek. I would love that. They rode out together on gentle horses, Sarah now confident enough in the saddle to enjoy the journey rather than fear it. The trail wound up through aspen groves and pine forests, climbing steadily, until they emerged onto a rocky outcrop that offered a vista of the entire valley below. The ranch looked small and peaceful. From this height, smoke curling from the chimney, the river a silver ribbon cutting through the golden grass. Caleb spread a blanket on the smooth rock and unpacked the simple meal he had brought: bread and cheese, cold chicken apples from Maria's cellar. They ate in comfortable silence, watching the sky turn from blue to gold to pink as the sun sank toward the horizon. Sarah, Caleb's voice was serious, I need to ask you something, and I need you to answer honestly. What is it? Are you happy here with me? Sarah looked at him, really looked at him. This man who had taken a chance on a stranger, who had treated her with more kindness and respect in a week than she had known in years, who had stood up to Blackwood and the town gossips and everyone who questioned his decision to marry her. This man who kissed her like she was precious and looked at her like she mattered. I am happier than I ever thought possible." The words came out thick with emotion. "When I got on that train in Boston, I thought I was running away. But I was actually running toward this, toward you, toward a life I did not even know I could have." Caleb reached out and wiped the smudge of dirt from her cheek with his thumb. "Then I want you to know something. You are not my mail-order bride anymore. That is not how I see you. You are my wife, truly, in every way that matters." Sarah felt tears prick at her eyes. "I want to be your wife, in every way. Not because I am obligated, but because I choose you." When he kissed her this time, it was different from the desperate passion of the night before. This was slow and deliberate and full of promise. They stayed on Eagle Ridge until the stars began to appear wrapped in the blanket against the cooling air, talking about everything and nothing, their hopes for the ranch, their fears about Blackwood, their dreams for a future that suddenly seemed possible, but that fragile peace was not to last. 2 days later, Mayor Hutchins called an emergency town meeting. The notice was posted on the door of every business in Durango. All citizens required to attend. Matter of urgent community safety. Sarah felt a knot of dread form in her stomach when Caleb showed her the notice. "This is Blackwood's doing, almost certainly. But we have to go. If we do not show up, it will only make us look guilty of whatever he is about to accuse us of." The town hall was packed when they arrived. Every seat was filled, and people lined the walls. Sarah felt the weight of dozens of eyes on her as she walked down the aisle beside Caleb. Some looks were curious, others were hostile, a few were sympathetic. Blackwood sat in the front row, dressed in an expensive suit, looking every inch the respectable pillar of the community. Dutch Keller lurked near the back, his scarred face impassive. Mayor Hutchins called the meeting to order. "We are here tonight to discuss a matter of grave concern to our community. There have been incidents of violence and lawlessness in recent weeks, a fire at Hart Ranch, cattle thefts, tensions between neighbors. We need to address this before someone gets hurt." Blackwood stood, his voice carrying easily through the packed room. "Mayor, if I may, I think we all know where these problems started. When Caleb Hart brought an unknown woman into our community, a mail-order bride with no family, no references, no one to vouch for her character. Since then, we have seen nothing but trouble." Sarah felt her face burn, but she kept her head high. Mrs. Thornton spoke up from her seat. "I heard Dutch Keller was caught setting the fire at Hart Ranch. Is that not one of your employees? Mr. Blackwood Dutch acted on his own initiative." Blackwood's voice was smooth as oil. "I have since terminated his employment, but the larger issue remains. Hart Ranch has become a source of instability. For the safety of our community, I propose that Caleb Hart sell his property and relocate elsewhere." A murmur ran through the crowd, some nods of agreement, others looks of outrage. Before Caleb could respond, Sarah stood. Her legs felt weak, but her voice was steady. "You do not know me. That much is true. I am just a mail-order bride, a woman with no family and no references." She looked around the room, meeting eyes, refusing to look away. "But I know this. My husband is the best man I have ever met. He treats me like a human being, not like property. He has shown me respect and kindness and partnership. If that kind of man makes this town unsafe, then the problem is not with him." A few people began to clap. Emma Cole, the store owner, who had quietly helped Sarah gather information about Blackwood's business dealings. 2 of the small ranchers who had suffered under Blackwood's strong-arm tactics. A young couple Sarah had never met. Reverend Todd stood. "I performed the marriage ceremony for Caleb and Sarah Hart. I have watched the way he treats her, with honor and love. Those are Christian values, the very foundation of a good community. Mr. Blackwood, can you say the same about how you treat the people around you?" The question hung in the air. Blackwood's face flushed with anger. "Fine. Keep your ranch Hart. But when the bank forecloses in 2 months, do not come crying to me." His voice was cold. "You have made your choice. Now live with the consequences." He strode from the hall, Dutch following like a loyal dog. The room erupted in conversation. After the meeting dispersed, Emma Cole approached Sarah with a quiet urgency. "Mrs. Hart, may I speak with you privately?" They stepped outside into the cool evening air. Emma glanced around to make sure they were alone. "I meant what I said earlier. I want to help you. Blackwood keeps records at the general store. Mrs. Thornton lets him use the back office for his business dealings, purchase orders, invoices, contracts. I have access to those files." Sarah's heart began to race. "What kind of records?" "Everything." Emma's eyes were bright with determination, including orders for building supplies, barbed wire lumber, things he is supposedly buying for expansion projects. But here is the interesting part. The property records show he has not purchased any new land in over a year. So, where is he building? Sarah understood immediately. On land he expects to own soon. Land he plans to take from my husband. Exactly. Emma squeezed Sarah's hand. "Give me a week. I will copy everything I can. If we can prove he has been planning to steal your ranch all along, using illegal methods to force you out, we can take it to the territorial marshal." Sarah felt tears of gratitude sting her eyes. "Why would you risk this? Blackwood could ruin you." "Because what he is doing is wrong." Emma's voice was firm. "And because you were brave enough to stand up in that room tonight and tell the truth. That took courage, real courage." When Sarah returned to Caleb, he was speaking with Reverend Todd and Sheriff Davies. The sheriff looked troubled. "I cannot do much without evidence, but I believe you, Hart. Blackwood is dirty. Everyone knows it. We just cannot prove it." Sarah stepped forward. "What if we could get proof, real documentation of his illegal activities?" All three men turned to look at her. Caleb's eyes narrowed. "Sarah, what are you thinking?" She told them about Emma's offer, about the records, about the possibility of building a case that even Blackwood's money and influence could not overcome. Sheriff Davies whistled low. "If you can get that documentation, I can take it to the territorial marshal. Federal charges for fraud and conspiracy. That is beyond Blackwood's reach." "But it is dangerous," Caleb said, his face pale. "If he finds out what you are doing, then we do not let him find out." Sarah met his eyes. "You said we were partners, that we face things together." "Well, I am ready to fight." On the ride back to Hart Valley, Caleb was quiet. When they reached the ranch, he helped Sarah down from the wagon, but did not immediately release her. Instead, he pulled her close, resting his forehead against hers. "I am terrified of losing you. You know that. Do not you? I am terrified too. But I am more terrified of losing this." She gestured at the ranch, at the home they were building together, "of letting Blackwood win because we were too afraid to fight back. You are the bravest person I know, Sarah Hart. I am only brave because you showed me I could be." That night, Sarah did not go to her own room. Instead, she knocked softly on Caleb's door. When he opened it, surprise and hope warring on his face, she simply said, "I do not want to sleep alone anymore." "Are you sure?" "I am sure." What followed was tender and gentle, and everything Sarah had never dared to hope for. Caleb treated her like she was something infinitely precious, taking his time, making sure she felt safe and cherished and wanted. When they finally came together, it was not just physical joining, but the true union of two people who had chosen each other against all odds. Later, lying in his arms with her head on his chest, listening to the steady beat of his heart, Sarah felt something she had not felt since her parents died. She felt like she belonged, like she had found her place in the world. "I love you, Caleb Hart." His arms tightened around her. "I love you too, Sarah. More than I can put into words." Outside, the stars wheeled overhead in their ancient patterns. The river sang its endless song. The mountains stood watch, as they had for millennia. And in the big log house in Hart Valley, two people who had found each other against impossible odds slept peacefully in each other's arms. But even in sleep, Sarah's mind was already working, planning, strategizing. Because the battle with Blackwood was far from over. In fact, it was only beginning, and this time she was not running away. This time she was standing and fighting for something that mattered. For her home, for her husband, for the life they were building together. Tomorrow, the real work would begin, gathering evidence and rising threats. The week that followed was a master class in patience and careful planning. Sarah understood that one misstep, one careless word could bring Blackwood's wrath down on them before they had the evidence they needed to fight back. So she moved quietly, deliberately, building her case piece by piece, like her mother had once built a garden, one seed at a time. Emma Cole proved to be an invaluable ally. The store owner had run her business for nearly 15 years, and in that time she had learned to be observant, to notice details that others missed. More importantly, she had access to the back office, where Blackwood conducted his private business dealings, assuming that a woman who sold dry goods and fabric posed no threat to his schemes. On a bright Tuesday morning, Sarah rode into town alone. Caleb had protested, still worried about Dutch Keller and the veiled threats from the town meeting, but Sarah had insisted. A man visiting the general store attracted no attention. A woman doing her weekly shopping was invisible, expected ordinary, and ordinary was exactly what they needed to be. Emma was alone in the store when Sarah entered Mrs. Thornton, having gone to Denver for a family matter. The timing was perfect, almost providential. The older woman locked the front door and turned the sign to closed. We have perhaps an hour before people start wondering why the store is shut in the middle of the day. Come quickly. The back office was small and cramped, dominated by a large oak desk covered in ledgers and papers. Emma had already pulled several files from the cabinet, laying them out with the precision of a woman who had spent hours planning this moment. Look at this. Emma pointed to a stack of invoices. 3 months ago, Blackwood ordered 500 feet of barbed wire, 24 fence posts, and enough lumber to build a substantial barn. The invoice says it was for expansion of his Circle B ranch. Sarah studied the papers. That seems normal enough for a rancher. It would be. Emma pulled out another document. Except the property records show Blackwood has not purchased any new land in over 18 months. So where exactly is he expanding? Sarah felt her pulse quicken. Do these invoices show where the materials were delivered? They do. Emma traced her finger down the page. Right here. Delivery address, Hart Valley eastern boundary. He was building on Caleb's land. Sarah's voice was barely a whisper. He was so certain he would get the ranch that he started construction before he even owned it. There is more. Emma pulled out another file. Work orders paid to various laborers, most of them Mexican workers from the community outside town. Maria's people. Can we talk to them? Get them to testify about what they were hired to build and where? Emma nodded. Maria has already been making inquiries. Most of the men are afraid of Blackwood, but a few are willing to speak the truth if it means stopping him from hurting more people. Sarah carefully noted the names, dates, and amounts on each document. Emma made copies using thin tracing paper, her handwriting small and precise. Every invoice, every receipt, every scrap of evidence that Blackwood had been planning to steal Hart Valley Ranch long before the bank had moved up Caleb's loan payment. This is enough to prove conspiracy, Sarah said. Fraud? Maybe even theft. It is a start. Emma gathered the papers carefully. But we need more. We need proof that he manipulated the bank, that he deliberately created the financial crisis that is threatening your husband. How do we get that? The same way we got this. Emma's smile was grim. Carefully, patiently, one piece at a time. While Sarah was in town building her case, Caleb was facing his own crisis. The letter had arrived that morning, delivered by a nervous clerk from the Durango Bank and Trust. Mr. Hart, your presence is requested for an urgent meeting regarding your outstanding loan. Please report to the bank at your earliest convenience. The signature belonged to Edgar Morris, the bank manager and Blackwood's closest ally in town. Caleb rode into Durango with Jose at his side, the older man's presence a comfort even though they both knew what this meeting would bring. The bank was an imposing brick building on Main Street designed to project stability and permanence. Inside everything was dark wood and polished brass, the smell of paper and ink thick in the air. "Mr. Morris will see you now." The clerk led them to a private office where the bank manager sat behind an enormous desk, his round face arranged in an expression of practiced sympathy. "Mr. Hart, thank you for coming so promptly." Morris did not stand or offer his hand. "Please sit." Caleb remained standing. "I will hear what you have to say, but I do not plan to stay long." Morris sighed as if dealing with a stubborn child. "Very well. The bank's board of directors has reviewed your loan status. Given the recent instability surrounding your property, the fire, the cattle theft, the general concerns about your management decisions, we have decided to accelerate the repayment schedule. The contract specifies 4 months from the date of notification." Caleb's voice was hard. "You sent that notification 6 weeks ago. I still have 10 weeks remaining. The board has the authority to modify terms when circumstances warrant." Morris pulled out a legal document. "As of today, your loan payment of $4,000 is due in 8 weeks, not 10. If you cannot pay in full by that date, the bank will foreclose and auction the property." "This is illegal." Jose spoke for the first time, his accented English sharp with anger. "The contract is binding. The contract includes provisions for early call in cases of risk to the bank's investment." Morris met Caleb's eyes with something like pity, though there was steel beneath it. "Mr. Hart, you must understand our position. Your ranch has been the site of criminal activity. Your marriage to an unknown woman suggests financial desperation. The board believes you are no longer a reliable borrower. Blackwood is on your board, is he not?" Caleb leaned forward, his hands flat on the desk. "He owns 40% of the stock. This has his fingerprints all over it. Mr. Blackwood is a respected member of our community and a valued investor. What he may or may not have suggested to the board is irrelevant. The decision has been made." Morris slid the document across the desk. 8 weeks, Mr. Hart. $4,000, or you lose Hart Valley." Outside in the bright sunlight that seemed to mock the darkness of what had just transpired, Caleb stood on the boardwalk, trying to control the rage and fear warring in his chest. Jose put a hand on his shoulder. "We will find a way, patron." How Caleb's voice cracked. "Even if we sell every head of cattle, every horse, we would not make 4,000 in 8 weeks. The market is down. The drought has everyone desperate. Then we sell some of the land. Keep the house and enough grazing for a small herd. Start over. That land belonged to my parents. My father cleared it, built on it, died defending it from men like Blackwood. If I sell even 1 acre, I dishonor his memory." Jose was quiet for a long moment. "Your father would want you to survive Hijo, and he would be proud that you are fighting so hard. But there is something else he would want more than the land. What he would want you to be happy, to have love, to build a future. The land is just dirt and grass, Caleb. What matters is the life you build on it. And the woman waiting for you at home, she is worth more than any ranch." The words hit Caleb like cold water. He thought of Sarah, of her courage in the town meeting, of her determination to fight for their future. She had not married him for the land or the money. She had chosen him when he had nothing to offer but himself. "You are right." Caleb straightened his shoulders. "Sarah is what matters. If we have to sell the ranch and start somewhere new, we will do it together." But Jose smiled. "I did not say give up, patron. I said remember what is important. Your Sarah she is not giving up. Why should you?" While Caleb was fighting his battle at the bank, another drama was unfolding in a very different location. In the private study of his ranch house, Hiram Blackwood sat behind a massive walnut desk, a glass of expensive whiskey in his hand, listening to Dutch Keller's report. "Hart's wife has been spending time with Emma Cole." Dutch's scarred face was impassive, but his eyes held a predatory gleam. They locked themselves in the store's back office for over an hour yesterday, doing what Dutch shrugged, could not see. But Emma has access to your files, the ones you keep in Thornton's office. Blackwood set down his glass with deliberate care. How much does Emma know? Everything you have stored there, invoices, work orders, all of it. For a long moment, Blackwood said nothing. Then he stood and walked to the window looking out over his vast holdings. Thousands of acres of prime grazing land, herds of cattle worth a fortune, buildings and barns and corrals that spoke of wealth and power. But it was not enough. It would never be enough. Not while Hart Valley sat there mocking him with its superior water rights and strategic position. Fire Emma immediately. Tell Abigail Thornton that if she wants to keep her store, she will cut all ties with the coal woman. And Hart's wife Blackwood turned his face cold. Scare her. Make it clear that continuing this investigation would be unwise. But do not touch her, not yet. I do not need a marshal sniffing around because some mail-order bride got hurt. Dutch grinned. I can be very persuasive without laying a hand on her. See that you are. Blackwood returned to his desk, his mind already calculating. The bank is calling the loan in 8 weeks. Hart cannot possibly pay. When he defaults, I will buy Hart Valley for a fraction of its value. The water rights alone are worth 10 times what I will pay. What about the evidence the women are gathering? It will not matter, Blackwood's voice was confident. By the time they compile enough to take to a marshal, I will already own the ranch. Legal possession is 9/10 of the law. Once the deed is in my name, whatever games Hart's little wife is playing become irrelevant. Dutch stood to leave, then paused. Boss, I have to ask, why do you want Hart Valley so bad? You already own half the county. Blackwood looked at him with something like surprise, as if the answer should be obvious. Because it is the one piece I do not have. Because as long as Hart controls that water, every rancher in the valley has options. They can buy from him instead of me. They can negotiate instead of accepting my terms. Hart Valley is not just land, Dutch. It is leverage. It is control. And I will have it. After Dutch left, Blackwood poured another whiskey and allowed himself a rare smile. In 8 weeks, maybe less, Hart would be broken. The ranch would be his. And the entire county would know that no one, absolutely no one, could stand against Hiram Blackwood and win. Sarah finished her shopping at the general store, her mind cataloging everything Emma had shown her. The evidence was damning, but they needed more. Testimony from the workers, bank records if they could get them. A clear timeline showing Blackwood's manipulation. She was so lost in thought that she did not notice the 3 men until she turned into the alley beside the store, heading toward where she had tied her horse. Mrs. Hart. Dutch Keller's voice was soft, almost friendly, which somehow made it more terrifying. What a pleasant surprise. Sarah's heart jumped into her throat. Dutch stood blocking the far end of the alley, 2 other men flanking him. She recognized them as Blackwood's ranch hands, hard-faced men with cold eyes. Excuse me, I need to get to my horse. In a minute. Dutch took a step forward. First, I think we need to have a little talk about being careful. About not sticking your pretty nose where it does not belong. Sarah's hand moved to the small knife she kept in her pocket, a kitchen blade Maria had insisted she carry. I have nothing to say to you. Oh, but I have things to say to you. Dutch's smile did not reach his eyes. See, word around town is you have been asking questions, looking at papers that are not your business, making plans that could cause problems for important people. I am simply doing my shopping. Sarah kept her voice steady, though her legs felt weak. Of course you are. Dutch moved closer, and Sarah backed against the wall. And I am simply offering friendly advice. Accidents happen on ranches, Mrs. Hart. Buildings burn. Cattle stampede, pretty young wives. Well, they can get hurt real easy, especially when their husbands are not around to protect them. Are you threatening me? Me, Dutch put a hand over his heart in mock innocence. I would never. I am just pointing out facts. Your husband is in a dangerous business. Ranching is hard. Dangerous. A woman alone, a woman without a husband to take care of her, she would have a real difficult time surviving out here. Sarah's mind raced. She could scream, but the alley was isolated. She could run, but Dutch and his men would catch her easily. She could fight, but 3 against 1. With her only weapon, a kitchen knife, were not odds she could win. So here is my advice, Mrs. Hart. Dutch leaned in close enough that she could smell whiskey on his breath. Go home, be a good wife, cook and clean and do whatever it is women do, and stop playing detective. Because if you do not, well, I would hate for something unfortunate to happen to that handsome husband of yours. He stepped back, his point made. The 2 ranch hands moved aside, clearing a path. Sarah walked past them on legs that trembled, refusing to run, refusing to show fear, even though terror was screaming through her veins. Remember what I said, Mrs. Hart? Dutch called after her. Accidents happen. Sarah made it to her horse, mounted with shaking hands, and rode out of town at a careful walk. Only when she was a mile down the road out of sight of Durango did she let the tears come. Not tears of fear, though she was afraid, tears of rage, of burning righteous fury that men like Dutch Keller and Hiram Blackwood thought they could intimidate her, threaten her, treat her like she was nothing. By the time she reached Hart Valley, the tears had dried, and her jaw was set with determination. Dutch had made a mistake. He had threatened the wrong woman. Because Sarah Brooks Hart was no longer the terrified girl who had cowered under her uncle's fists. She was a woman who had found something worth fighting for, and she would not be scared away. When she rode into the ranch yard, Caleb was waiting. One look at her face, and he was running, pulling her from the horse before she had fully dismounted. What happened? Are you hurt? Sarah held on to him, drawing strength from his solid presence. Dutch Keller. He cornered me in town, threatened us, said accidents could happen. Caleb's entire body went rigid with fury. I will kill him. I swear to God, Sarah, I will kill him. No. Sarah pulled back to look into his eyes. That is what he wants. He wants you to do something stupid, something that will get you arrested or killed. We fight him our way. With evidence, with the law. He threatened you. Caleb's voice was raw. He put his hands on you. He did not touch me. Just words. Ugly words meant to scare me. She took a breath. And I was scared. I am still scared. But I am more angry than afraid. Jose had come from the barn, Maria right behind him. When they heard what happened, Maria crossed herself, and Jose's face went dark with rage. This is too dangerous, Senora. Maria gripped Sarah's hands. You should not go to town alone anymore. I agree. Caleb looked at Jose. From now on, someone goes with her, always. But that night, lying in Caleb's arms, Sarah could not sleep. She kept seeing Dutch's face, hearing his threats. The message had been clear. Back off, or people would get hurt. Maybe Caleb, maybe her, maybe both of them. You are shaking. Caleb's voice was soft in the darkness. I keep thinking about what he said. About accidents. I will not let anyone hurt you. I promise. Sarah turned to face him, searching his eyes in the moonlight streaming through the window. What if we cannot win this, Caleb? What if Blackwood is too powerful, too connected? What if all we are doing is delaying the inevitable, then we delay it? Caleb kissed her forehead, and we fight, and we hope. Because the alternative is giving up, and I am not ready to do that. Are you? Sarah thought about everything she had gained in the past weeks. A home, a partner, love, a future. No, I am not ready to give up. Then we stand together, whatever comes. Outside the stars wheeled overhead in their ancient dance. The river sang its endless song. The mountains kept their silent watch. And in Hart Valley, 2 people who had found each other against all odds held tight to each other and to hope, knowing that the hardest battles still lay ahead. Rising together against the storm, Sarah told him everything, not in the heat of the moment when fear still coursed through her veins, But later that evening, when they were alone in their bedroom, the door closed against the world. She described Dutch's face, his threats, the calculated way he had cornered her in that alley. She watched Caleb's expression darken with each word, saw his hands clench into fists, so tight his knuckles went white. When she finished, he stood and paced to the window, his back rigid with barely controlled fury. "I am going to kill him." The words were not spoken in anger, but as a simple statement of fact, which somehow made them more terrifying. "I am going to ride to Blackwood's ranch right now and put a bullet in Dutch Keller." Number Sarah's voice was firm. "That is exactly what they want. You shoot Dutch, you go to jail or hang. Either way, Blackwood wins. He gets the ranch and I lose you." "Is that what you want?" Caleb turned, his eyes blazing. "What I want is for that son of a—" He stopped, took a breath, fought for control. "What I want is for you to be safe. And as long as Dutch Keller is walking around, you are not safe. Then we make sure he cannot walk around much longer." Sarah crossed to her bag and pulled out the carefully folded papers Emma had copied. "We beat him the right way with this." She spread the documents on the bed. Invoices showing materials delivered to Hart Valley land before Blackwood owned it. Work orders paid to laborers for construction on property that was not his. A paper trail so clear that even the most corrupt judge could not ignore it. Caleb stared at the evidence, and slowly the rage on his face transformed into something else. Wonder, hope, pride. "You did this. You gathered all this while I was at the bank. Emma helped. But yes," Sarah's voice was steady, "this proves Blackwood has been planning to steal our ranch for months, maybe longer. He was so certain he would get it that he started building on our land." Caleb picked up one of the invoices, studying it carefully. "This is dated 3 months ago. He was ordering materials for expansion before the bank even moved up my loan payment." "Exactly." Sarah felt a fierce satisfaction. "He created the crisis at the bank to force you to default. This was never about business. It was always about taking what is ours." For a long moment, Caleb just looked at her. Then he set down the paper and crossed the room in 3 strides, pulling her into his arms with a desperation that took her breath away. "I love you, Sarah Hart." The words came out rough, almost broken. "I know I have said it before, but I need you to understand. I love you. Not because you are helping me save the ranch. Not because you are brave or smart or any of those things. I love you because you are you. Because when I am with you, I am the man I always wanted to be." Sarah felt tears slip down her cheeks. "I love you too, and I am not letting Blackwood or Dutch or anyone else take this away from us. We fight together." They held each other in the lamplight, drawing strength from the simple fact of being together. Outside, the night was dark and full of threats. But in this room, in each other's arms, they were safe. They were home. "Tomorrow," Caleb said finally, "we take this to the people who can help us. We do not fight this battle alone." The next morning, Jose rode out before dawn carrying carefully penned invitations. By noon, they began to arrive. Small ranchers from up and down the valley, men and women who had suffered under Blackwood's shadow for years but had been too afraid or too isolated to fight back. The Hendersons, who had lost water rights to Blackwood's legal maneuvering. The Chens, a Chinese family who farmed a small plot and faced constant prejudice from Blackwood's supporters. The Washingtons, former slaves who had come west seeking freedom and found Blackwood's hired men burning crosses on their property. They gathered in the main room of the Hart House, a dozen families representing the diversity and resilience of the Colorado frontier. Caleb stood before them, Sarah at his side, and laid out the evidence piece by piece. Blackwood has been stealing from all of us, not just land and water, but hope. The belief that honest work and fair dealing mean anything. He looked around the room, meeting eyes. But we have something he does not. We have the truth, and we have each other. A rancher named Tom Henderson spoke up, his weathered face skeptical. The truth did not help me when Blackwood's lawyers took my water rights. Having each other did not stop him from undercutting my prices until I nearly went bankrupt. What makes you think this time will be different? Sarah stepped forward. Because this time we have proof. Not just suspicions or stories, but documented evidence of his crimes. And because this time we are not fighting as individuals, we are fighting as a community. She spread the invoices and work orders on the table. These show Blackwood building on land he does not own, conspiring to commit fraud. If we take this to the territorial marshal, he will have to investigate. Even Blackwood cannot buy his way out of federal charges. The room was silent as people examined the documents. Then Mrs. Chen, a tiny woman with iron in her spine, spoke in heavily accented English. My husband and I, we help. Blackwood threatened to burn our farm if we not sell cheap. We have nothing to lose and everything to gain. Count us in. This from James Washington, a tall man with the bearing of someone who had fought too many battles already. We came west for freedom. Time we fought for it. One by one the families pledged their support. Some offered testimony about Blackwood's intimidation tactics. Others promised to attend the courthouse meeting and speak the truth publicly. A few, like the Hendersons, offered something even more valuable. Tom Henderson had connections with the territorial government through his brother, who worked in the land office. He could get property records, deeds documentation that would make the case airtight. By the time the sun began to set, they had the framework of a plan. In 1 week, they would present their evidence at a public meeting in the Durango courthouse. They would invite the territorial marshal, the land office representatives, the newspaper editor. They would shine a light so bright on Blackwood's corruption that even his money and influence could not hide it. But there was one more ally Sarah had not expected. The knock came just as people were beginning to leave. Jose opened the door to reveal Abigail Thornton standing on the porch, her face pale but determined. Behind her stood Emma Cole, whose presence explained how Mrs. Thornton had known about the meeting, Mrs. Hart. The older woman's voice was formal but not cold. "May I speak with you?" Sarah stepped outside, aware of Caleb following close behind. "Mrs. Thornton, what can I do for you?" The matriarch of Durango society looked at Sarah for a long moment, and something in her expression cracked. "I came to apologize. And to help." "You do not need to apologize." Sarah kept her voice gentle. "I understand that change is difficult, that trust takes time." "Number." Mrs. Thornton shook her head. "You do not understand. I treated you terribly because I was afraid. My husband's store depends on good relationships with men like Blackwood. If we angered him, he could ruin us. So I convinced myself that you were the problem, not him. That if I just rejected you, dismissed you, everything would stay the same. But things cannot stay the same, can they?" Sarah said quietly. "No, and they should not." Mrs. Thornton reached into her bag and pulled out a ledger. "This belonged to my late husband. He kept records of every transaction, every deal, every questionable business practice he witnessed in 30 years of running that store, including Blackwood's." She handed the book to Caleb. "On page 47, you will find a record of Blackwood bribing a bank official to manipulate loan terms. On page 62, a list of properties he acquired through intimidation. This ledger has been sitting in my attic for 5 years, since my husband passed. He made me promise to give it to someone who would use it for good. I think that someone is you." Sarah felt tears sting her eyes. "Why now?" "What changed you did." Mrs. Thornton met her gaze directly. "You stood up in that town meeting and spoke truth when it would have been easier to stay silent. You showed more courage in 5 minutes than I have shown in 5 years. And I realized that if I did not help you, I would have to live with myself, knowing I let a good woman be destroyed because I was too cowardly to do the right thing. Thank you." Sarah took the older woman's hand. "This means more than you know." After Mrs. Thornton left, Sarah and Caleb stood on the porch, watching the last of the sunset paint the mountains in shades of gold and crimson. The day had been long and emotionally exhausting, but for the first time since Blackwood had made his threats, Sarah felt something other than fear. She felt hope, real tangible hope that they might actually win this fight. "Come with me." Caleb took her hand. "There is something I want to show you." He led her away from the house, past the barn and corrals, up a small rise that overlooked the entire valley. The stars were beginning to appear in the darkening sky, brilliant and countless in the clean mountain air. They sat on the grass shoulders, touching, and for a while neither spoke. They simply breathed together, watching night settle over their land. "When this is over," Caleb said finally, "when we have beaten Blackwood and saved the ranch, I want to build something here. A house, maybe, or a school, something that represents what we fought for." Sarah leaned her head on his shoulder.